Hello, everybody. Welcome to Dangerous Ideas That Today Becomes Common Censored, which is my show with Eleanor Goldfield.
Hello.
I'm Lee Camp, and today we got a lot of important stories for you. We got continuing coverage of what's going on in Gaza, and by what's going on, that's my euphemism that means genocide. So we got that. We've got a bunch of stories on that. What Secretary Blinken's been involved in, which is horrific. We have to. We have no other choice. I can tell you what we're not going to be talking about is the Republican debate because it doesn't frickin' matter.
You know, I don't think you can call it a debate if people are just shitting out their mouths.
I mean, that's a fair point. They did give them those little bags that they could hold up.
It still doesn't make it a debate. That just makes it more.
It makes it professional, I think.
It makes it less of a public hazard, I guess.
Yeah, that's true. But all right, everybody, we're gonna dive right in. Please hit thumbs up if you're here. If you're not here, this is important. Do not hit thumbs up. Absolutely. I don't want it. I don't need it. If you aren't here, do not click thumbs up. Okay, let's do it. We're starting with an article from Democracy Now. We've got more Democracy Now than normal.
Which doesn't mean that we don't still have some issues with Democracy Now, but
we have some issues with Democracy Now. They've always been better on Palestinian issues than mainstream media.
You couldn't possibly be worse. Jesus Christ.
Fair point.
That's a low bar, Lee.
Fair point. I don't think you guys really need the updates. Over 17,000, maybe it's 18,000 now have been murdered in Gaza. This has gone on for over 2 months. As I covered yesterday, it all fits the dictionary definition of genocide as I read it off of the Holocaust Memorial Fund website. So this is genocide, and that's what we're witnessing. But I titled our episode after what one of these activists said, saying we are all Palestinians, and it's an interesting point to be made. I'll let you start off.
Well, so this kind of combines a couple of stories because we're not going to talk about COP28. I mean, you may have already mentioned.
I actually have one about. I have a point about it coming up. So sorry, we are going to mention it.
Oh, Jesus! Again, between that and Blinken, it's like
hold on. But I will tell you this: the story about COP28 that I am bringing up later, you're going to like. You're going to like the guy who's featured. So how about that?
Okay. So COP28, the quote unquote climate conference that's being run by an oil tycoon.
Cop out 28.
Yeah. I think that this was a good I like this because it connects issues, right? The COP28 is being held in the United Arab Emirates, and there have been very, very strict limits on protests. I mean, I was at COP21 in Paris, and there were very strict limits on protests there as well. The gendarmes were out that's the French police. It just sounds fancier to say gendarmes. Were out in force and arresting
people. It sounds like someone who doesn't know French cursing in French.
But I'd say,
gendarme.
Can I just take a moment to say that the French people, not like French Empire and French colonialism and the French government, but French people, I love you. And your beautiful blend of joie de vivre and burn shit down. It just makes me so happy.
Joie de burn? Joie de burn?
Anyway, that's a side note. But a lot of the protests at COPs are obviously about climate. But this one was specifically about a ceasefire and demanding a ceasefire and being in solidarity with Palestine. And so some held banners with watermelons painted on them. People were chanting things like "from the river to the sea," et cetera, et cetera. And what I wanted to highlight about this is the fact that these issues are connected. There is no such thing as a green war. And we've talked about this before too, but the largest polluter on the planet is actually the US military. It's equal to 140 countries, just the US military.
And for those of you who question that, the largest polluter on the planet, it's the largest organizational polluter. So for a single organization, not a country, but a single organization, the U.S. military is the number one polluter.
Right. So basically, it's incredibly important to connect these issues because nothing exists in a vacuum. And of course, if we look at, I just had a really interesting, this will air next week on Project Censored, but I had a really interesting conversation with a Palestinian activist from Gaza, now living in Colorado, who was talking about the ecocide that and greenwashing that takes place vis-a-vis Israel and Palestine, like destroying olive groves and trying to terraform the desert, which of course just means destroying that ecosystem, because the desert is an ecosystem. We're just taught that it's like this void, but it is in fact an ecosystem. And so these issues are inextricably linked. So justice for Palestinians, Palestinian liberation, is necessarily also liberation and justice for the ecosystems that these people have called home since time immemorial. And so those connections are super important to make. And so I wanted to share this with you also to say F COP28 and all of the COPs before it and all of the COPs to come, because just like any other COP, a cab,
Yes.
and it's completely useless. And it is like an absolute waste of time. And it's basically a way for big oil, big gas, all of these, greenwashing campaigns to get together, figure out more ways to greenwash, more ways to pull the wool over our eyes, and do absolutely nothing about the issues that are threatening our survival as a species. So unless it's a protest, particularly one like this, don't pay any attention, or whatever Lee's about to share, that too, I guess, pay attention to.
All great points. And also in terms of the idea that, what I meant when I did also titled this episode, "We Are All Palestinian," is it has now gotten to a point where the destruction of the Palestinians is ethnic cleansing, is genocide. And if you've got to be, if you're going to be for any of the oppressed, you got to be for all of the oppressed. You can't be, oh, I care about people and I don't want to see unarmed people get killed or attacked or murdered or persecuted or oppressed, except this group I don't really care about. Then you're not for you have thrown away any kind of moral core, any kind of moral center, moral compass. So it really does link us all in that we should all, if you care about any of the oppressed, if you have any moment where you go all the way from, an empire destroying a group of people down to when the boss harasses a worker, I don't like it. Like all of that is under the umbrella of giving a shit about the oppressed and understanding power dynamics. And if you are going to just ignore the Palestinian cause, then you are saying that you do not care about oppressed peoples.
Amen.
So I feel that it links all of us in that way, at least all of us who even give an iota of a shit, a tip of a turd about those who are harmed.
Tip of a turd. Did you just come up with that?
I did come up with it initially. I have used it before though.
Oh, I like it.
Okay, so we're gonna circle back. Several of these stories linked together or has segued together.
They all linked
interesting.
together, Lee. That was just the
That was
point
the
that
point.
I
That
made.
was the
Were you
point.
not
That
listening?
was absolutely the point I
Yep.
just made. Yeah,
Mhm.
and maybe you just made. But anyway, we'll get back to COP in a minute. But for a moment, let's stick with the genocides being perpetrated and the attacks by Israel. This is about Israel's now, if they weren't at the beginning of this 2 months ago, is now assassinating, targeting academics, not just journalists and medical professionals. They're basically going after the culture of Gazans, anyone who speaks for large groups of people and speaks out and represents Gazans. And this is kind of the latest, and this is horrific. I mean, as is all of it. But an IDF strike has killed Gaza scholar Rafat Al-Arir. And in their article, a friend is paying tribute. But to read you a little bit more about him, scholar and policy analyst Jihad Abisalam remembers his friend Rafat Al-Arir, the acclaimed Palestinian academic and activist who was killed by an Israeli airstrike in Gaza City. He was a towering figure in Palestinian society, especially in Gaza. He used education and language as a weapon against oppression. And the tragedy that has befallen the academic, scholarly, and intellectual community in Gaza and in Palestine is unprecedented. Israel destroying the foundations of society in the Gaza Strip. This is part of genocide. This is how you perpetrate a genocide. You don't just go after the military or the fighters or even the military-age males. You start going after anyone who is an academic, is a doctor, is a spiritual healer, is a religious leader. You try and attack these centers of culture, and that's what they're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And he was specifically targeted. He was sheltering in a school, and the Israeli forces literally called him to tell him that they were going to kill him. So he left the school so that the other people sheltering there would not be murdered. And he was then, of course, targeted. So again, this is also part of what Israel is doing, and it also once again lends a reminder. It reminds us that this being the most surveilled place on the planet, they know where everybody is at any given time. And Al-Arir was well known. I mean, he was a good friend of many of my friends. He was a good friend of Nora Barrows-Friedman, who works with Electronic Intifada. He was a good friend of Dan Cohen, who has also done a lot of work on Gaza and Israel. And so they needed to kill this messenger in particular because he has been for a long time a threat, because he continues to speak out in Western spaces, so-called Western spaces, about what's happening, and showing people and being a tour guide to people in Gaza and in the West Bank and other places about to show them what life is really like. And that is a dire threat to Israel. And so this is, of course, one of the reasons that he was specifically targeted. And again, like we've talked about in the past, poets and artists, or as James Baldwin put it, poets are the only ones who can tell us what it means to be on this planet and survive. And so poets have that ability, and he had that ability to put his experience into those words and have it mean something to people all across the globe. And so he is one of, tens of thousands of people to die in this genocide. So it's not like we're saying this is the most important person. It's not about that. It's a commentary on the specific targeting, why he was specifically targeted, and why they wanted to.
And a side story of this, which to me is far less important than simply the assassination of him, but it's still a side story that people are talking about, is that Barry Weiss, the longtime New York Times writer, who is a well-known, strong Zionist, and puts forward 99% of what she does is propaganda for the U.S. empire. She's left the New York Times a couple of years ago, but she singled him out because he made a joke. The propaganda was that Hamas put babies in like kitchen ovens and murdered them, and it was completely false. There's no evidence, complete garbage. So someone tweeted about, oh yeah, acting like that was real, and his response was, did they add baking soda or something like that? Because his point was, this is a farce, and so I'm going to add a joke to it because this is a stupid joke. This is not true. That was his point. Barry Weiss then singled him out and said, look at Al-Arir joking about killing babies. And apparently he and some others felt that that's what pushed him up on the list of people the IDF wanted to kill. And he had actually said or tweeted, if I die, it'll be because of Barry Weiss and her or others like her. So many people are pointing out that Barry Weiss is now responsible for the death of this academic and poet and writer and leader. I don't think she's 100% responsible. I think that Israel has a game plan of murdering well-known academics and speakers and leaders. But anyway, that is a side note. So while that horror show is going on, and like you couldn't write, honestly, this is more insane than Catch-22, the novel Catch-22, and 1984 mushed together. It is so the insanity that is going on right now, and this just is another example of it. Antony Blinken, while this is going on, is bragging that he joined human rights leaders for the 75th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights.
I'd like to know who else is sitting around that table, by the way.
And in recognition of their courageous, he attended in recognition of their courageous work. We know that when more people in more places have their rights respected, the world is more peaceful, more secure, more prosperous. This is as, he's a Secretary of State. This is as the government is dropping bombs on innocent Palestinians. They are U.S. bombs. Some estimates say 70% of the bombs being dropped by Israel are U.S. bombs. The Wall Street Journal, which is no left-wing outlet, has reported that the U.S. has sent 15,000 bombs to Israel to be dropped since October 7th.
Netanyahu put up I don't remember if it was a post or a tweet, or he just made a statement. He said he had 3 requests from the U.S. munitions. Literally, Biden could pick up the phone. It would be a 5-minute phone call, and he could just tell Israel to stop, and Israel would have to, because they don't have the military power to keep this up. The only reason that they can perpetuate this genocide is because of the United States. It would take one goddamn phone call. That's it.
And even to go a step back from ending it, the U.S. could so easily not be a part of it. At least not be a further part of it. Yes, Israel has built itself up with the U.S. might and U.S. money, but U.S. could cut off money, munitions that we've been sending, munitions that are being sold by various American weapons contractors, could cut all that off. On top of that, the U.S. military has said that special forces are helping pilot drones over Gaza, giving Israel intelligence for their bombing campaign, for their genocide. We could cut that off. You could also remove the special forces troops that are apparently in Israel. Now, there are some debates as to what those special forces troops are doing, whether they're active in this genocide or whether they're just standing in Israel just in case. But either way, you could remove them. You could cut off in 1 second. Joe Biden and Blinken and the others could cut off every aspect of this that is American, but they're not. Not ever. They could also remove their veto from the UN Security Council that was calling for a ceasefire.
I mean, the power of the United States, and we don't oftentimes make these connections, but like, look what the U.S. has been able to do to Cuba, to Venezuela. And I'm not suggesting that like the U.S. should seek to kill even more people, but the idea is that just by saying that that sanctions against Cuba, sanctions against Venezuela has brought, I mean, they're not the only two, I'm just using them as an example, have brought these countries to their knees. And particularly with Cuba, they've managed to not only like survive, but thrive. And their largest export is doctors. And they now have a vaccine against lung cancer. Our export is death. That's a side note. But the United States has so much power because of the petrodollar, which I know that, Leah has talked about quite a bit. If you just levied sanctions against Israel, which is what the whole entire BDS movement includes, boycott, divest, sanctions, you could literally bring Israel to its knees. And yet they don't. So again, this idea that there's nothing the US could do, there's absolute bullshit. So if you hear people saying that, oh, well, they wanted to tell them like, oh, just watch where you're bombing or whatever.
They've told them tisk, tisk, tisk.
It's bullshit.
Absolutely. But here's the positive side. Blinken is not getting a good night's sleep. Protesters were outside his house, mansion, whatever it is, in DC or Arlington, Virginia. Most of them live in Arlington, Virginia. At early in the morning to just wake him up.
Good.
Blinken, you're a liar. We demand a ceasefire. Bloody Blinken.
And
Blinken, you're
I love that because it's just like it's just reminding them even every moment. I mean, whether they woke him up early, if they woke him up early, that's even better, and he lost sleep over it. But just reminding him every moment in his face that that he's a genocidal maniac. He's facilitating genocide, and you know this is a small group of people. This is not like they had millions there, but I praise them. I am a fan of their harassment.
And this is something you can do. Like I remember I saw a video. I guess it was like a couple of weeks ago or something, where Trudeau had gone out to a restaurant, and basically people had shamed him, publicly shamed him. So that he had to leave. These people should not be allowed to have a calm and enjoyable dinner. These people should not be allowed to sit at home and relax and enjoy themselves. These people have the blood of tens of thousands on their hands. So disrupt
at minimum.
them. Yeah, disrupt. I'm just talking about Palestine, but disrupt them any chance you get. And I mean, I think I would have a hard time. Like I always find it fascinating and like impressive when somebody's like, "Oh, I interrupted Senator so and so or Secretary so and so," and I'm like, I don't know what these people look like. Like I think they all look the same, to be honest. They're all like old, crotchety white dudes.
Blinken,
maybe like a white lady here and there, but like
Blinken legit has no pupils, so
that's true. You pointed that out.
That's how you know he's a lizard person.
Dude, they literally I remember the first time I saw that in a film. It was in From Hell. And the guy who plays Bilbo Baggins, whatever his name is, they give him like just like the full black eye with like no pupil, and it's like, terrifying.
Yeah.
Well, don't spoil it, but it happens at one point in the film, and it's terrifying. And he doesn't blink either, which is interesting
because his name. Yeah.
Okay, we're in a simulation.
Simulation, absolutely. Anyway, well done to those protesters.
Yeah.
Okay, last thing. I think the last thing on Israel. This is John Kirby, the spokesperson for the State Department, and
they keep having different spokespeople. Wasn't there what remember when we were watching Sam Husseini was questioning some other spokesperson for the State Department?
Kirby's the national security, I think.
Oh,
you're right. National security, I think.
Okay.
Anyway.
Sorry.
Either one.
I wasn't sure if they were cycling through them because they were all getting so stressed about having to respond to these questions.
Because they all have no idea how to handle this shit. But anyway, you guys know this guy's full of garbage, but you got to see this one.
Just look at him.
About the humanitarian situation in Gaza. Name me one more nation, any other nation, that's doing as much as the United States to alleviate the pain and suffering of the people of Gaza. You can't. You just can't. The United States, through President Biden, is leading the effort to get trucks, food, water, medicine, and fuel into the people of Gaza. Wait. Name another nation. Name another nation that's doing is more than the United States to get hostages or to get people, foreign nationals, out of Gaza. You can't do it. And name another nation that is doing more to urge the Israeli counterparts, our Israeli counterparts, to be as cautious and deliberate as they can be in the prosecution of their military operations.
How about anybody at the UN that voted for a mandatory ceasefire? How about anybody that
no, like anybody in general? Because here's the thing: even if you voted no, I'd like Israel to keep bombing, you're not actually supplying the bombs,
right?
So literally anybody else,
any country is doing more.
Anybody else,
any country's doing more by not sending the bombs, right?
Yeah.
No, but this is so amazing. Like, name anyone else, and then he goes trying to get foreign nationals out. Well, maybe they're doing that so that they can facilitate Israel's genocide. Hey, let us get our people out so you can keep obliterating Palestinians. You know, let us clear the path for you so you can just bomb anyone you want, children, doesn't matter. Just go for it because we will have gotten our foreign nationals out. Like, that doesn't mean you're stopping that. And anyone who's pressuring Israel more, most of the world is pressuring Israel more. And like you said, most of the world is not sending bombs to Israel.
Well, even if they are, they're not sending nearly as many. And I'm not trying to like discount people sending bombs to Israel, but nobody is literally upholding the apartheid state of Israel. Like if the US pulled out and like Sweden was still sending bombs, which Sweden does because Sweden is a huge military manufacturer, Sweden could not possibly prop up the state of Israel. So it's like even if you are an absolute pile of shit and you're sending weapons to Israel, you can't possibly go head to head with Uncle Sam when it comes to facilitating genocide.
And I'll leave it at that. He doesn't need more time than that. I don't, not at all. Okay, so we're gonna move on to another topic. You want to talk about the Dutch elections?
Sure.
Hold on, give me 1 second.
Okay.
Just before we get to that, can everyone please make sure and hit thumbs up? It takes you 2 seconds and it really does help the stream. Also, leave a comment, all that good stuff. In about 10 minutes, we're going to switch over to justrumble.com/LeeCamp as well as my locals page, but we'll do that in a few minutes. And let's keep going.
Well, so here's the thing. I don't want to talk about the Dutch elections just because of the Dutch elections. I want to talk about them in the context of why that matters, because I feel like a lot of people were at home are watching this and being like, I'm sorry, you want to talk about the Dutch elections? I got to take a shit. I don't care.
What they mean
and I get that.
in a larger sense, yeah.
So, and also I just wanted to show you a picture of this guy because he is like he looks like a caricature of what if you said like, oh, this far right Looney Tune won the elections in Holland. This is what you draw. Can we?
I'm working on it.
Okay.
Give me a second. God.
It's terrifying, isn't it?
What is that?
That's what I'm saying. Like, he doesn't look real. He does not look real. It looks like stage makeup if they were like, hey, we want somebody who's like a total fascist, but also kind of looks like Ken from Barbie and Ken. Like, can we, like...
It
aged,
looks like,
you know,
but it looks like
1,000 years.
It looks like an AI program was asked to like take, I don't know, like a old wrinkly turd and like make it human or something,
and put a wig on it and eyebrows. Like it. So okay, I just wanted to share that first because it's terrifying and also like very apt, I guess. So there's a lot of
simulation.
There's a lot of details about like how this guy won and all of that. But what I want to get to here is the fact that what was
I was just gonna say, do you want to give his name? So this guy won the Dutch elections just the other day. You pronounce it.
I don't know how to Geert. I think it's Geert, but Wilders or
Geert Wilders.
Yeah. So I wanted to, and again, the details of how he won. Yeah, that's whatever. But so I like the way that Truth Out puts this, and I want to make sure that I'm not getting that I give the proper byline here. Oh boy, by CJ Polishranu. I apologize if I'm mispronouncing that name, but anyway. So, as they put it, the Netherlands endured 13 years of neoliberal rule led by the People's Party for Freedom and Democracy, a center-right party, which promoted the interests of private enterprises and big business and paid little attention to the needs of the average citizen. Where does that sound like?
Yeah, that sounds familiar.
I also like that they put endured 13 years of neoliberal rule, because here's the thing. Neoliberalism is like fascism, but with more steps. Like it takes you longer to get there.
It leads there, yeah.
You still get to the same spot, but like the far right, like fascist parties, that's like the direct route, right? It's like, from here to here, a straight line. Neoliberalism is like, oh, well, I'm going to take you around. Oh, and here's that Black Lives Matter flag, and here's the Pride flag, and here's this Human Rights Council that we sat on. And so it's like it's this shit. It's meandering, but yes, fascism is still straight ahead.
And I would just also like to point out that the reason this impacts all of us is this is I call it, or I've termed it, the gravity of capitalism. When you have a system, and if you want to add adjectives, you can say free market capitalism, but when you have a system that puts profit over all else, even if it may, after World War II, some of these societies were in a better place where they cared about citizens, all of them are slowly, some faster than others. The United States is on a really fast path, but being yanked towards there is zero care for the average citizen. It's all about war and money. and there is zero moral center, community destroyed. That is where it's a black hole slowly sucking everything in, starting out small and getting bigger and bigger. And you see this gravity of capitalism in other countries as well. It's not just the United States.
No, absolutely. And this article goes on to point out when Wilders, however you say his name, won, congratulations poured in from Hungary's far right, Italian deputy minister and leader of the extreme right party, Matteo Salvini, France's Marine Le Pen. So
I have another one here, which I have the headline for. Argentina.
Right. But anyway, so basically the crux of this is that neoliberalism brought the Netherlands to the point where somebody like this could win. And I see this happening in Sweden. This is obviously, I mean, it's been happening here. People can attest to that. I don't need to share that with you. So the question then is, how do you counter this? And of course, just like the Democrats, neoliberal and, centrist parties will always say shit like, oh, well, we need to compromise, we need to collaborate, and we're going to say the right things, but then do nothing. And we will continue to uphold the corporate state. And by the way, as Mussolini said, fascism could better be described as corporatism. So then riddle me this: what do we have in the United States?
Right.
So basically, as they write here in closing, quote, the answer to the threat they pose, the far right, in the 21st century is clear: tackling the root causes of economic inequality and ensuring that no one is left behind. The return of the social state and the expansion of democracy are the best tools available for fighting fascism and far right extremism, end quote. And that's never something that the Democrats are going to do. It's never something that these, mealy-mouthed centrist parties in Europe or the US are ever going to do. And so we, again, with I guess maybe today's episode should be called Connecting the Dots. His triumph in the Netherlands is exactly tied to the far right rise here, to the far right rise in Sweden, in England, in France, in Germany, all over, in India and Turkey, whatever, wherever it may be, in Israel, although there's no left in Israel.
There's no left, but the ones in power are about as far right as they come in Israel. Yeah.
But again, these things happen as a global surge. And the more we look at ourselves in a silo, the more we lament, oh, Trump, or oh, DeSantis, or oh, whatever, the more we totally miss the larger picture, and we miss the importance of solidarity in connecting these struggles in order to really address how to combat them effectively. And so that's why I wanted to share that, not because I think that you all are dying to know about Dutch elections in your free time.
No, but it's a great point that you're seeing this in several countries. Now, there are a lot of positives of what's going on around the world as well, but I think we need to keep our eye on this rise of fascism. The positives of what's going on in the world is the waning power of the U.S. empire, how many nations are willing to stand up against it, the growing power of some African countries, some Latin American countries, China forming BRICS. So there are positives in this world as well, but this is where capitalism leads. Capitalism creates neoliberalism that guts everybody's resources, treats citizens like pieces of shit, and then that leads to fascism. So I know you said we would not be talking about cops. So now let's talk about cops. They're saying activists are saying COP stands for a cabal of oil producers. Climate scientist Kevin Anderson slams the corporate capture of COP28. They've all been meaningless. I mean, they've changed absolutely nothing. And in fact, as I covered the other day, the UAE was even using it as a place to cement oil deals.
Well, with the COP that they had in Paris, I remember part of it was sponsored by Total Energy, which is an oil and gas company. So it's this is just, it's absolute farce.
Yeah. these cops have become little more than a scam under which the oil companies and the other fossil fuel companies are hiding that nothing is being done. Technology and fairness have to go hand in hand in order to save the planet. But really, I wanted that story to be a lead in to highlight this impressive guy, who I don't know, maybe people knew about this story before, and I'm late to the party, but
it was pretty
big. Yeah. Indigenous climate activist Jacob Johns speaks out. He's there at COP, basically protesting and speaking. And he speaks out about the MAGA gunman that shot him in New Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
He was part of a protest. Jacob Johns, a Hopi, and can you say that?
Odom.
Kimmel Odom.
Kimmel Odom. They're well, I know that Tohono O'odham, their ancestral lands cross over between what is now the United States and Mexico. And I did some stories about them back in the day. I don't know if they're a part of or necessarily directly related to the Kimmel O'odham, but
environmental defender who's leading the Indigenous Wisdom Keepers delegation at COP28. This is his first interview after surviving being shot in the chest by a far-right agitator in September who was wearing a MAGA hat. Johns and other Indigenous activists were holding a vigil opposing plans to reinstall a statue honoring the conquistador, which means genocidal maniac, Juan de Oñate.
Who cares about if you say his name?
That's a fair point. Mexico, when a 23-year-old shooter wearing a red MAGA hat fired into the crowd. John said he actually died for a time in the helicopter and was revived. He said, we as Indigenous people.
I don't think you have to say that he was revived.
Well,
that seems relatively clear.
Agreed, but it seems weird to be like, he died in the helicopter, but he's still out there speaking, which is good for him. Just still getting it done. That seems weirder to me. Or if he's walking around going, I am dead. I know it doesn't look it, but he says, we as Indigenous people understand that as the old world dies, that a new one is created and that we must focus on the creation process. And you and I were just talking about that the other day.
Yeah. And to quote one of my favorites, Gramsci, the old world is dying and a new one struggles to be born. This is the time of monsters.
Okay, so we're about to bring you, and that's a great segue to.
Gramsci is always a good segue.
To
I feel
no, well, okay, but him being shot is a good segue to some gun control discussions and lack of that you wanted to talk about, and so we're going to tackle that as well as hopefully get some more topics as well. That's all at rumble.com/Lee Camp, rumble.com/Lee Camp, completely free to watch there. You pay nothing at Rumble. If you're on Locals, you guys are amazing. The members at Locals, which you can find by leecamp.net, it'll go straight there, or the red button on Rumbles that says Join Lee. That stays the same as well. So everybody join us over at rumble.com/Lee Camp. No, I think it hurts the algorithm.
Oh, it does?
I don't know. YouTube doesn't like when you link to other things. So rumble.com/Lee Camp.
Okay. You know what YouTube